Mental illness in Star Trek is rarely shown. We have obviously Sarek in the episode Sarek from TNG. We have T'Pol going through her own dealings with addiction. We have Captain Picard himself going through an almost Alzheimer's-like problem at the end of Star Trek TNG in All Good Things. And we have a universe that doesn't really deal with these problems, but characters are still obviously affected by them. And why wouldn't they be? So in Star Trek The Next Generation, we're introduced to Sarek at a much older age where he's not an ambassador, he's not, well, he is an ambassador, but he's on his last journey. And we discover that he's going through a Vulcan illness which takes away his ability to control his emotions. Akin to almost like dementia, but not quite. He's still got all of his memories there. It just makes everything very intense and very extreme. Sarek is dealing with a horrible mental illness, and all he can think about is the pain and the pain and the fears he has for the rest of his life.
There is an epidemic of violent incidents aboard the Enterprise. As we speak, the situation is worsening.
And it is your hypothesis that I am the cause of these incidents?
Yes. My chief medical officer has explored all other probable causes.
I share your concern.
He's looked after by his wife Perrin, and she tries to keep it secret, along with one of his advisors. The episode goes through, and Picard eventually decides to take on the emotional overflow of Sarek, using a mind meld to help him control his feelings. We don't have this in the real world. Dementia and Alzheimer's still ravage people of a senior age, sometimes younger ages. And the world looks at these people as if they are just troubled. And it's a sad thing to watch a person go from being the life of the party and an amazing and inspiring person to being a shell of who they are. I know this because my father himself had Alzheimer's and passed away. One of the reasons I started this channel was to actually do something with my life that I enjoy. And he taught me that. Because Joe did everything. That's my dad. Joe did everything. He represented unions, he worked for the water board, he was a part of one of our political parties. He had strong opinions and strong views and was passionate about him. And then he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Early onset Alzheimer's 10 years ago. It was slow at first. I didn't really notice that much of a difference. He just got quiet. And I put that down to a lot of that strength going. He didn't want to show that weakness. And you see that with Sarek in the episode of Sarek. You see that he doesn't believe there's anything wrong with him, but he kind of knows there's something wrong with him. And people around him see it. And people around him know it. But they're trying to keep it sort of, oh no, you're fine, calm down, calm down. That's kind of what you do when someone has something which is a mortal thing, a brain thing. They're going to pass away. In Star Trek: The Next Generation, All Good Things, we see Picard has obviously had some memory problems and some memory issues, and his Irritability syndrome has reached a point where they're questioning what he actually thinks.
That they might be facing a difficult illness.
But you said yourself that this is only a possibility.
But you've been to the future. You know it's going to happen.
I prefer to look on the future as something which is not written in stone.
Now, mental disease within Star Trek seems to be very prevalent still. And with all the medical advances, they can literally rewrite the DNA of everyone. But obviously we haven't beaten it all. The main point of these episodes, and I believe this, and I watched Sarek, Sarek was he was a Vulcan ambassador in the original series. He was in the movies. he grew up, he had a very distant relationship with his son, but his son still admired him in a way, but they butted heads.
And she who is my wife.
Captain Kirk?
Our pleasure, madam. As soon as you're settled, I'll arrange a tour of the ship. Mr. Spark will conduct you.
I prefer another guide, Captain.
As you wish, Ambassador.
Me and my dad used to do the same thing. Two strong men trying to sort of bounce off each other and never quite meshing. When we see Sarek next is in the episodes Unification Part 1 and Part 2, of which Spock is told of his father's death and instantly gives a sense of sadness that he didn't reconnect. And he's a Vulcan, and I'm aware that he's not meant to show emotions. But Spock in the later years definitely showed emotions.
Oh, Captain, I have found our arguments quite useful. Almost as useful as those I had with my father.
Would it surprise you to learn that he found them equally valuable?
Ironically, you may know Sarek better than his own son does. My father and I never chose to meld.
But Spock has a regret. You can see he has a regret that he didn't know his father as well as he should have. And he wished he could have been there, but he had things he needed to do. Real world problems within Star Trek, which are dealt with really, really well. They're dealing with that illness from originally Perrin and his reputation, Sarek's reputation within Star Trek. And then, because he obviously, the character has built up a closeness with us. And you're watching this character be less than what he normally was, which is a really it's a strong way to look at characters. And Star Trek does this because as the actors have aged, they obviously aren't. William Shatner was not bonk every woman on a planet Kirk up until Star Trek Generations. Captain Picard wasn't bald Captain Picard who would always get into a fight all through his era into Picard. Because people age, people change, and they get, not less, but they have to slow down and they change as people. Picard does this by showing that the syndrome very much affects how he feels about the people around him and what he wants to achieve, a sense of achievement for himself. Sarek wanted to achieve that one last mission, that one last diplomatic mission. And he achieved it, and then he went away. He was locked in a room and he passed away. My dad was in an old people's home, and he had got to the point where he couldn't look after himself anymore. He couldn't control things. He couldn't speak properly. He couldn't remember something you said 10 seconds ago. Sarek is lying on the bed in the episode, writhing and speaking and not understanding. And it's very, very raw to see a character develop, a character who's so proud, lying on this weirdly stone bed, almost just not aware. Well, he wasn't aware of anything. He managed to get some lucidity for a few minutes and then went back into it.
Peace and long life. Live long and live long and
Perrin warns Picard because it's shocking. It's shocking to see people like, it's shocking to see our characters like that. Character growth within Star Trek can be a little thing, can be a big thing. But these are the characters that really emphasize the human part of the Star Trek series. The character of Sarek within Star Trek Next Generation literally had 2 episodes. 2 episodes in the Next Generation to establish who he was, who everyone thought he was, and how he had declined. You see him in Star Trek the original series as the stalwart father who's uncomfortable with his son, but loves his wife, but won't actually say it. And you see him throughout the Star Trek films growing proud of his son, wanting to grow with his son, and obviously that relationship maybe fell a bit backwards later on in the years. You see him come aboard and he's trying to play that he's alright. My dad always said, I'm so fine. You would ask him how he is, I'm so fine. But then occasionally in the moment, he would go, I don't feel right. I don't feel like right. You'd ask why, and he'd go, I don't know. I don't feel right. Sarek does this in the episode by just ignoring it. He just ignores the mental illness that he has. Well, the mental illness, he has a disease. It's a brain disease that eats away at his control. My dad had a disease that ate away at his control. Picard, in All Good Things, had a disease that ate away at his control. So does this change the dynamic between the man and our perception of him, or the people around him? Is he less of a man because he's like that now? This is the question I'm asking today. Like, this is what I wanted to talk about. Is these characters who have obviously brain diseases or brain issues, we have T'Pol in Enterprise dealing with her own drug addiction, dealing with the fact that she's now technically by the Vulcans too emotional and she has brain damage.
It's a trillium. I devised a way to inject it into my bloodstream.
Trillium exposure is deadly to Vulcans. It eats away at the neural pathways.
These are characters which within the Star Trek universe are very, very important. The mental issues are important. We see this within all of the series dealing with older characters. Deep Space Nine has some of the original series Klingons come back on in, and they're not the same as they were, they're older characters. So what do you do when a character gets older? You deal with them getting older. These diseases and these problems are universal to humans. Lots of people get them. Apparently, due to the COVID-19 vaccine, a lot more people will be getting Alzheimer's. It's a unique way that Star Trek lets us know, and probably, like, unlike other sci-fi franchises, Doctor Who deals with the Doctor's aging and how old the Doctor is by he's mentally drained and he's sort of a bit over the universe constantly needing to be protected. They deal with his loneliness and people dying around him because he doesn't stop. You're not really dealing with mortality. The Doctor will go on until the series ends. Other shows generally didn't last long enough to deal with that mortality. Star Wars didn't have enough of Luke Skywalker to really show us the progression of Luke Skywalker getting older. And it's actually one of the things that makes Star Trek unique in this, that we have characters who come back and they cross over series and stories, and we see those characters go from old to young, or young to old. It's a two-way street in Star Trek. And we see their growth, and sometimes they have a sad end. Sad ending sometimes is what life is, even though you're a hero on a Starfleet ship traveling the galaxy. Tell me what you think about this. I really enjoy talking about these Alzheimer's and talking about these issues. Make sure to look out my other videos for more content. I'm Trek Trav, and live long and prosper.